On today's episode of the show, we're explaining why cornerback will be one of the strongest positions for the Louisville Cardinals this season behind the best cornerback in the ACC, three key transfers into the program this offseason, and a young player that it will be extremely challenging to keep off the field. All that and more coming up on today's Locked On Louisville.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Card Nation, welcome into this second Saturday edition episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. As always, I'm your host, Dalton Pence. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. College football is a little over a month away, but nonetheless, this summer, FanDuel continues to hook up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. As always, I want to personally thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, the Locked On Louisville podcast is free and available on all streaming services 5 days a week. Your team every day. Cornerback is going to be one of the strongest positions for the Louisville Cardinals this fall, mainly due to them returning the top cornerback in the ACC, Quincy Riley, three key transfers, Thornton, Holloway, and Taz Nicholson. And we'll conclude the show by explaining why it's going to be challenging to keep Aaron Williams off the field. Cornerback was an interesting spot last year for Louisville. Obviously, you had Quincy Riley, who was pretty much one of the best cornerbacks in the ACC last season. Jarvis Brownlee battled injury for a good portion of the season, but when he played, he played really tough, and he was a lot better than I feel like most fans knew. You look at the numbers, Jarvis was really, really solid, and unfortunately, early on in his Louisville career back in 2022, that game against Florida State really didn't do him any favors in terms of reputation, but Brownlee was really good for the Cardinals in his 2 seasons in the Derby City. You had some other guys that stepped up. You had Storm Duck, who sort of was hit or miss in the cornerbacks room, and you had some other guys that played a factor. But the secondary struggled. Now, you could contribute some of that to the pass rush really not getting home in the second part of the season. But nonetheless, let's call it how it is. The cornerbacks room is going to be much improved. It has more depth. Overall, it's better. It's going to be one of the strongest positions for the Cardinals this fall, and it all begins with a key decision that was made this past winter. We talked last week about how surprising it was that Ashton Gillotte decided to return to the program. Equally surprising, Quincy Riley making his decision to return for his final season at Louisville was equally as notable, equally as important, and ultimately it changes the trajectory of this defense. On this show, I feel like it's become a narrative in the comments that I'm more pessimistic than I should be as it relates to record predictions, game predictions, player expectations. A lot of people, someone just called me mediocre Dalton in the YouTube comments, which, it is what it is. It's all in good fun. But perhaps at times I'm not as optimistic as I should be. Although I feel like I remove a lot of bias from things where I truly think my approach is based upon analytics, the eye test, statistics, you name it. I try to take as much bias as I can out of things. But when I put it this way, I don't deliver hot takes just to deliver hot takes. That's not really the type of show that I like to run. My takes are founded by statistics and by evidence backing it up. So why am I explaining that? I say all that to say this. Louisville returned the best cornerback in the ACC and one of, if not the best cornerback in the country. According to Pro Football Focus, Quincy Riley is the highest graded cornerback returning from last season, 85.9 grade. Pretty impressive, right? He was second in the wins above average metric by Pro Football Focus, only trailing one other FBS cornerback. Second in terms of the value metric. Only allowed 23 of the 63 targets in his coverage to be caught last year, which was the sixth lowest completion rate in the FBS. That's 36.5%. He's only going to get better. And that should scare the living daylight out of opposing offenses that Louisville will go up against. Simply put, he controls half of the field. When you have a dominant CB1 that can completely remove almost half of the field from the conversation, it's like Ashton Gelati. When you have a guy that dominates the defense in such a way, it helps the entire defense out. It raises the floor of the level of play. When you bring that in the cornerbacks aspect, you're doing the same thing, but just in the passing realm, just in coverage. Quincy Riley, I think it was hilarious that he was an all-ACC honorable mention. You're telling me that there were that many better cornerbacks in the ACC better than him? No, there were not. The 6-foot native of Columbia, South Carolina, had a career high with 49 tackles in 2023. That was almost double what his previous career high was at Middle Tennessee State. He had 10 pass deflections. He had 3 interceptions. He had 20 assisted tackles. 29 of them were solo. Guys, I keep coming back to this point. You can't understate or you can't overstate how important it is to return a player of Quincy Riley's ability. He's already getting first-round mocks, first-round grades for the 2025 NFL Draft. He's been really, really underrated to the point to where he's not being talked about as much as he should, but it's starting to trend in the right direction. Like he's starting to be discussed in, relation to the first round of the NFL Draft next April. One of the best cornerbacks returning not only in the conference, but the country. Like if you tell me, here's my hot take. If we're going to talk about hot takes, Quincy Riley is the best cornerback in college football, and Louisville is bringing him back for another season. Again, the gravity around that decision changes the ceiling and the outlook for this team. Now, I know that there are over 50 players on a college roster, 11 play at any given time, but the impact of having a cornerback that doesn't allow much to get caught when thrown his way. He's improving as a run defender, which is really, really nice for the Louisville defense. And it takes a lot of pressure off. Gelati controls one half of the defensive line. Quincy Riley controls one half of the secondary, to where it's going to help guys out that we're going to talk about, like Corey Thornton, Taz Nicholson, Tay Holloway, Aaron Williams, all the other cornerbacks that are in discussion. Riley will go down as one of the best cornerbacks in program history. He's been phenomenal ever since he stepped foot on campus. Limited playing time here and there in 2022, but he was the Cardinals' best defensive back. 2023, more of the same. 10 pass deflections. Didn't really get the ball thrown his way a ton, but when he did, 36.5% completion percentage. That's 6th lowest in the FBS. Not only is he going to be in contention for ACC first-team honors, ACC Defensive Player of the Year honors, but first-team All-American is not out of the conversation. Like I said, I believe him. Now, this might be where I'm biased, but highest-graded cornerback coming back, 6th lowest completion percentage. You talk to Ron English and company, the coaching staff, over the spring, and they say he's a completely different guy. He's turning more and more into a professional, and I think that this guy is going to have a historic season. And that sets the tone for this cornerback's room. If you don't return Riley, I mean, yeah, you could have potentially still had a really, really good cornerbacks room, and you brought in 3 really good transfers. You have a freshman that's going to contend for a ton of meaningful snaps. But this is a ceiling raiser. This changes the entire outlook. Like I said with Gelati, bringing Riley back could be the difference between you making or not making the college football playoff next winter or this upcoming winter. It's just wild to me. Like, I know that we talk about how key it is for these two guys to return, but let me once again restate, Louisville is returning Ashton Gelati and Quincy Riley. This does not happen a lot. You return your 2 best players on defense that both could have gone to the NFL draft. They both returned. And MJ Griffin goes. Like, don't even get me started on the firepower that this defense has, specifically as it relates to this episode in the cornerbacks room. Quincy Riley sets the tone. Best cornerback in the ACC. In my opinion, best cornerback in the country. He's going to prove it this year. First round NFL draft pick next spring. So those that believe me to be pessimistic, mediocre Dalton, I'm going out on a limb here. That's my prediction. But I would be doing the cornerbacks room a disservice if I didn't talk about the other players that Louisville brought in. Louisville brought in 3 really solid transfers that are all going to see meaningful snaps. Now, whether or not they start or not, that's a question for a different day. But 3 really good players from Power 5 conferences that alone should excite the fan base. We'll talk about Corey Thornton, Holloway, and Taz Nicholson coming up here in the next segment on today's episode of Locked on Louisville. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part's guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or you get your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. And before we get into the next segment, I do want to once again reiterate that you need to be tuning into Locked On Sports today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming from mainstream networks. Locked On Sports today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. Cardinal fans, once again, thanks for making Locked On Louisville your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, Locked On Louisville, free and available on all streaming services, 5 days a week, your team every day. We just mentioned how Quincy Riley changes the ceiling of this cornerbacks room, and rightfully so, because it's true. But as shown in previous seasons, you need more than just one really good cornerback, one great cornerback. And Jarvis Brownlee was really solid, but he was hurt a good portion of last season to where Louisville's depth was tested and struggled a little bit down the stretch. Now, like I said, you can contribute some of that to the pass rush not really getting home at the end of the season, but nonetheless, there still needed to be improvement from the cornerbacks room. Louisville not only, I feel like, upgraded the room as a whole, but it added more quality depth. Like, they brought in 3 really good transfers that have multiple seasons of Power 5 experience that can come to this program and produce right away. The first one is Corey Thornton from Miami, who there's the connection with Coach Jehovah, Zach Soskin and company from Miami, 6'1", 195 pounds, played 4 seasons with the UCF Knights, had over 25 tackles in each of his 4 seasons, almost 50 in 2022, which was his best season. has 4 interceptions to his name, and since his freshman season, at least 6 pass deflections. So you get a veteran cornerback that can play on the boundary outside of Quincy Riley. Solid size, solid run defender. I think a little bit better in coverage than maybe Jarvis Brownlee was, and he held his own in the Big 12 last season. Saw a little bit of a step down in production, but nonetheless, Thornton is a really solid CB2 for this Cardinals team that can rise up and be, at the very least, serviceable in the defensive backfield. And with 1 season of college eligibility remaining, I do think it is key to note that he's going to be able to step in right away and produce. And that's what you need. You need guys that can step in right away and be really, really good. And Thornton fits that mold. And it could have been Louisville CB1. I wouldn't. I don't know how I feel about him being the CB1 if Quincy Riley wouldn't have returned. But thankfully, we will never have to answer that question, or hopefully, knock on wood, no injuries occur. But I really think that this is an underrated addition. Multiple seasons of really good college production. So having a guy with that size that can high point the football, solid route running, solid technique, solid backpedaler, and just smooth play. I'm really excited to see what Corey Thornton can bring to the mix. But he's going to be playing the boundary. A guy that I think could slide into the slot is Tayon Nicholson, also known as Taz is his nickname. Spent 3 seasons with Illinois, and this past year was one of the highest graded cornerbacks in the Big Ten, a part of a really, really good Illinois defense that has been phenomenal over the past couple seasons. He's been a starter on that defense. Excuse me. Almost doubled his total tackles number from 2022 to 2023, went from 19 to 36, tied a career high in pass deflections. Only has 1 interception to his name, 2 forced fumbles this past season. But Taz Nicholson at 5'11", 185 pounds from Jacksonville, Florida. I'm really excited to see what he brings because he was a part of a really, really good defense that, ultimately played really, really well in the Big Ten. Now, he flipped his commitment from, I believe it was Ole Miss to Louisville back in January. But his overall most productive year started 11 of the 12 games and played after he had a minimal role the first 2 seasons. But after an injury in 2022, he rose back onto the scene in 2023 and replaced him with a really, really good player in I completely lost my train of thought there. Had a really, really good 2023, replaced Jarvis Brownlee with a really good player in Taz Nicholson and Corey Thornton. So adding 2 solid pieces was huge for this defensive backfield. But although those 2 guys have 1 season, I think Taz Nicholson only has 1 season of college ball remaining, if I'm not mistaken. Let's see. He played 5 games in 2021. So I think it's just 1 season remaining. Jeff Brohm did opt to go with a guy with some more eligibility. They brought in Tay Holloway from North Carolina. And Tay Holloway sort of had an up and down season for the North Carolina Tar Heels. I know it's become sort of a talking point that North Carolina doesn't put their defensive players in the best position to succeed. Look at Cam Kelly being one of those guys who played a key role for the Cardinals. Holloway started out early on playing a ton of snaps, and by the end of the season, he was sort of not getting a ton of opportunities as a freshman. Played really well against South Carolina, had 4 total tackles. But ultimately, I think it was a down year for the UNC defense. They didn't have a good defense, one of the worst in the conference. So you wonder if, playing on a better defense will help him out. I think that it will. Holloway has really good size, being 6'1", 190 pounds. From the people that I've talked to in the program, he's had a very good offseason and spring ball heading into fall camp, and he's going to be a guy that's going to be in line for some solid, meaningful snaps. And having 3 seasons of college eligibility remaining cannot be, overstated, because after this year, when you lose Riley, you lose Thornton, you lose Nicholson, you bring back a guy in Tay Holloway who could end up being your CB1. And I think that he has the tendencies and the skills to be able to slide into that role if he continues to develop. I'm really excited about what he brings to the table with his size. He's going to be playing on the boundary as well, probably backing up either Q or Corey Thornton. I think he's going to be a key reserve, sort of like Taz Nicholson, just depending on the personnel on the field. So I'm excited. I'm excited because Louisville has brought in 3 guys that it's not like they brought in guys that just didn't play, but apparently have the talent, just haven't really got the opportunity. These are 3 guys that have gotten opportunities. They were starters, or at the very least, key rotational pieces at their previous destinations. So the 3 additions via the transfer portal help raise this cornerbacks room ceiling and give them quality depth. However, there's going to be another player in the mix, a guy that it's going to be really challenging to keep off the field. That is redshirt freshman Aaron Williams. He could be one of the most talented guys on this defense, and for good reason. He's going to be right in the mix. It's going to be really hard for Jeff Brohm not to play him this season. I'll explain why coming up here in the final segment. Today's episode of the show also brought to you by FanDuel. College football is a little over a month away. The sports aren't sporting like I want them to, but FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open up the app and dream up bets anytime that I'm in the mood. If you go to FanDuel.com, you'll see all the boosts and bonus that they offer daily, because there's something for everyone every day all summer long. I have been really zoning in on my MLB betting. Won a 4-leg parlay just recently. Padres and Orioles money line. Dylan Cease and Corbin Burns over 5 strikeouts. Won me a good amount of change there. And I'm looking to ride the hot streak into the weekend. But do yourself a favor. Tune into FanDuel.com and get your big win, because FanDuel remains MLB's number one sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Major League Baseball. And into the final segment of this second Saturday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Once again, thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Do want to give us another shout out. Make your second listen Locked On Canes. Alex Dono does a great job of hosting the Locked On show, covering everything Miami Hurricanes. If you want to get to know about a key ACC opponent for the Cardinals this fall, tune into that show, because he calls it how it is, and he tells it to you straight. And I think that it's going to be very, very interesting matchup that we want to get to know about. And I have been tuning in to sort of get an idea of what to expect from the Miami team this fall. So be sure to make Locked On Canes your second listen of the day. But to conclude this cornerbacks position preview episode of the show, Quincy Riley, fantastic. Best cornerback in the ACC. Corey Thornton, Tay Holloway, Taz Nicholson, going to play a good amount of snaps this season for the Cardinals. But Louisville does return one of its highest commits at the cornerback position in program history. Aaron Williams was ranked as the 200th best player in the 2023 class, according to 24/7 Sports Composite. Was a key member of that St. John Bosco team from Bellflower, California, that won the state championship his senior season with Pierce Clarkson, Jalil McClain, and others. However, he played the majority of that season with a torn ACL. It was elite. He was one of the best cornerbacks in the country on a torn ACL. He ended up opting for the surgery last spring, which that was the right decision to have, but it was going to force him to miss his freshman year of football, which it did. And according to everyone now, there's no setbacks. There's no limitation. He's fully healthy. Those that I've talked to around the program have told me that he's been fantastic this spring, and he is primed for a breakout year. The 6'2" cornerback was one of the best cornerbacks in the country. He was a part of the All-American Bowl. Extremely physical, really solid size, extremely physical. In terms of defending the run, I think that he could have a Jarvis Brownlee level of production at that spot. Really technical, uses that size to press at the line of scrimmage, and I think that with his size, does a great job of high pointing the football, tracks the football well. I think he played both ways in high school. If I'm not for certain, definitely did on the 7-on-7 circuit. But if he's able to, bounce back from injury with that same level of athleticism, gosh, it's going to be challenging to keep him off the field. And all accounts out of Louisville's program have reiterated that he really hasn't lost a step. He has, recovered really well from that surgery. And if he returns to the level of athleticism that he has, the level of speed, gosh, man, like I said, it's going to be really challenging. He's going to be in the mix at corner. He's going to basically be demanding that Jeff Brohm put him on the field because he's going to be one of the best players in the secondary. Williams has cornerback one potential. He seemed like when he committed, or it seemed like when he committed, that he was going to be the heir apparent to Quincy Riley as the team's best cornerback, and I still think that very well could be the trajectory. But he's facing a little bit of a log jam at the moment when you have Riley back, Thornton, Holloway, and Nicholson into the mix, more so Thornton and Holloway. And then after that, you have some guys like Raymond Mosby, Jaden Minkins, and company. But Williams, with that skill set, with the technique, with the size, coupled with the speed and athleticism, don't sleep on this guy. I could see early on if Louisville blows Austin Peay out, if they have a high winning margin against Jacksonville State, I really could see Williams playing a ton of snaps early on in the first couple of games just to sort of see where he's at. And if he succeeds, then he could be in line for snaps against Georgia Tech in that third, or technically it's the fourth week. Louisville has a weird bye. I guess it's college football as it is now. Louisville plays 2 games and then has a bye week before Georgia Tech. Like they play August 31st and September 6th or 7th. They have a bye on September 14th, and then they play Georgia Tech on the 21st. But nonetheless, I'm not going to get down that rabbit hole. I'm just saying that Williams is going to get meaningful snaps this season. I think that it would not surprise me to see him in the 2 deep immediately and competing for starting level snaps. I think that he is that good. What's working against him is that he doesn't have that ACC experience just yet, so it might take him a couple of games or a good portion of the season to get acclimated with the speed of play. But for a guy that was elite in high school ball in California on a torn ACL, I have really high hopes for this type of a player, and Aaron Williams is going to be in the mix at cornerback. Louisville's one of their main strong suits position-wise this season is going to be cornerback. It's going to be one of the best cornerback rooms in the ACC. I'm really excited to see how this position progresses throughout the season. That is going to wrap up today's episode of the show. On tomorrow's show, we'll be making our final position preview of the safety position. MJ Griffin returns. They bring in some solid players like Tamari McDonald. We'll break it down in full on tomorrow's episode of the show. Everyone have a great day. We'll see you right back here